What if Chappell Roan got into black metal? Find out on this week's What If, How, When, Why. Hello, my name is Morgan Brown, and for the past few months I've been making a series of videos that are called What If videos. The idea of these is that every week I take a different popular song and imagine an alternative universe in which a different set of circumstances or a decision that someone made caused that song to come out completely different from the version that we know and love. And then take the original lead vocal and record my own backing track to it using just GarageBand and whatever instruments I have to hand in order to realise this alternative universe version of the song. So this week, the song I took on was Good Luck Babe by Chappell Roan, and I attempted to turn that into a black metal song. If you haven't heard that yet, I'm going to put a link to the full music video at the end of this video and also in the description. But in the meantime, here's a little taster of it. So Chappell Roan is definitely one of the most interesting pop stars to emerge in recent years. I must admit I'm definitely late to the party, as is often the case with contemporary pop. So it was only probably about a year ago that Hot to Go just popped up in my recommended videos on YouTube, and I kind of ignored it for a bit. It just kept popping up, so eventually I clicked on it and thought, oh, this is pretty cool, catchy song, interesting performer. Didn't think much more of it. And then a little while later on I heard Pink Pony Club. Bit more interested in that, thought that was a really good song. And then when I finally heard Good Luck Babe recently, thought that was better again. I think at first the fact that she takes a lot of her image from the aesthetics of drag is obviously a focal point, and then the music quite often has quite a retro 80s synth pop feel to it. So the whole thing could be just kitschy and campy, and there's certainly an element of that to it. But what's impressive is that there's a real depth and sincerity to what she does as well. The vocals always carry a real emotional weight, and the songwriting actually, once you get past the sort of campiness of some of the stuff, there is real depth there as well. And Good Luck Babe is definitely a powerful song. And then I saw the performance on the VMAs, which was just quite a staggering spectacle, featuring Chappell herself and an army of dancers all in chainmail and wielding broadswords, and there was a crossbow and a flaming castle in the background. And my first thought with that was, oh, that's so metal. And in that moment, I obviously knew I was definitely going to create some kind of metal version of the song, and specifically black metal. I mean, I immediately just had visions of fans posing in Norwegian forests with broadswords and flaming crosses and all that kind of nonsense that goes along with the black metal scene. So it was kind of on from that moment. Black metal's a troublesome genre. I'm not really a proper black metal fan. I listen to quite a lot of your old school kind of first generation black metal, and I've dabbled in more recent stuff, but it's one of these genres that has a lot of lore surrounding it, which is really interesting. So I've probably spent as much time reading about black metal and watching documentaries as I have actually listening to the music. For me, it's one of those genres a little bit like Oi, the skinhead punk movement, where there's a lot of great music, but there's also an awful lot of really sketchy stuff. So you just have to tread carefully. If you're not familiar with the genre at all, I guess metal music has always dabbled in the occult, going back to Black Sabbath and Blue Oyster Cult, and probably even before that into the psychedelic era with bands like Coven. The appeal of the danger of and mystique of the dark side has always been there. And I think metal fans are naturally drawn to horror movies and that kind of imagery. So it was natural that a form of metal that really focused in on that kind of imagery would eventually emerge. And the first band to use the term black metal was Venom from Newcastle back in the early 80s. Their second album was actually titled Black Metal in 1982. So Venom, if you're not familiar with them, were an early thrash metal band, contemporaries as well of the UK-82 punk bands like Discharge and GBH. So there's a bit of that in their sound too. Not the slickest musicians. I mean, metal's a genre that normally has a pretty high level of musicianship, whereas Venom, pretty ropey players, just hammering away as fast as they could. Everything kind of sloppy and noisy, chaotic, pretty lo-fi, and just these wild satanic lyrics over music that's kind of a combination of bits of Judas Priest and Motorhead and Discharge. And that really is the birth of black metal. Although it doesn't sound much like what most people would think of as black metal now, there are elements of that have been carried forward. I guess then you get the likes of Bathory, who, again, super satanic, introduce the shrill, shrieking, kind of screaming vocals that are really common in black metal now. These trebly, repetitive, cold-sounding guitar riffs. At the same time, you have Switzerland's Hellhammer. Hellhammer, I think, at the time were much maligned in the metal scene for not being very good musicians again. Really basic, Discharge-influenced, brutal, satanic punk metal. And then Tom G. Warrior from Hellhammer went on to form Celtic Frost, who are this absolute powerhouse of dark, weird, bleak kind of heavy metal. Again, a massive influence on what was to come. Black metal through the 80s was really interesting. Every different regional scene kind of had its own version. So there are satanic bands cropping up in South America and in Germany, each with their own kind of really unique sound. But I guess what most people think of as black metal was the second wave, which primarily sprang up in Norway in the early 90s with bands like Mayhem, Burzum, and Emperor. And obviously, there's a massive story around that whole scene, which has been told countless times by people who know more about it than me, so I'm not going to go into it. It's the point where a lot of the kind of trademark elements of black metal really come to the fore musically. It's also the time when a lot of the things that people most think of outside music happened. Church burnings, murders. So I don't want to dwell on that. Suffice to say that I think most metal fans enjoy the kind of dark side of metal just the same way that people enjoy watching a horror movie or whatever. It's a dark fantasy that people can enjoy, but it should be a fiction. If you're sufficiently into black metal that you think it's okay to burn down a church or stab someone, maybe you need to stop listening to black metal and go and seek help. That said, some great records came out of that scene as well. Just worth being aware of who the characters are who you're listening to. It's hard to keep track of who's sketchy in that scene because there are some pretty horrible people in that. Certainly Count Grishnach, as he chose to call himself, Varg from Burzum, who was also in Mayhem, who murdered Euronymous from Mayhem. You still see people now wearing Burzum t-shirts and proudly listening to Burzum. The guy is a neo-Nazi murderer. If you're listening to Burzum now, for me, that's like listening to Screwdriver, the notorious fascist skinhead band. Nah, no. There are a lot of people in that scene who've done some pretty despicable things. I used some footage of Gorgoroth in my video for this week's song and then read up afterwards, and yeah, at least one or two members of that band are absolute pieces of shit, so I kind of feel bad for including them in this in any way, but I take solace in the fact that if they found that their images were being used to go with the Chappell Roan song, they probably really hate it, so that makes me feel slightly better. But yeah, anyway, this scene develops in Norway, building on all this cool stuff that's happened in the 80s, your Celtic Frost, your Venom, Bathory, your Merciful Fate as well. They take all of those elements and develop this style with really harsh tremolo pick guitars, speedy kind of blast beat drums, shrieking vocals, raw production, which I think was very much a reaction to the death metal scene at the time. The black metal scene of the early 90s was emerging at a time when the Florida death metal sound was at its peak with that very clean Scott Burns Morrisound production. So there's very much a feeling among people in that Norwegian scene that, right, we're going to make our music sound really harsh so that people who are into the commercial music won't like it, keeping the casual listeners away, keeping it very much just for the inner circle of true black metal fans. But you can only go so far with that. There's something to be said for being a purist, but it's also kind of a musical cul-de-sac. So then after that, after a few years, you get bands developing, they're adding keyboards, symphonic elements and then incorporating elements of other styles. So you get people delving into folk-tinged black metal or combining black metal with elements of crust punk, which Dark Throne, who are kind of one of the leading bands, ended up going in more of a kind of crust punk direction, or expanding into more progressive elements, even adding bits of shoegaze music in there. So from being this very narrow, exclusive, elitist gatekeeping scene, it's actually kind of expanded a lot now. And there is some really interesting stuff in there. Just as I say, approach with caution. Don't end up listening to some terrible Nazi crap by mistake. One thing that is a common bit of imagery that's used is people standing around with broadswords, just that whole kind of medieval look. So this Chappell Roan performance, I thought, that looks pretty black metal. So I decided I was going to make at least a black metal tinged version of Good Luck Babe. And the alternative universe scenario that I came up with to justify making this was, I imagined that Chappell's in the process of making the record. In some downtime, she's just watching YouTube, just seeing what comes up. And somehow the algorithm presents her with a video of Psy, the Japanese black metal band, who are a really interesting band, actually. And so she's watching this and she sees their performance with Dr. Me Cannibal, who's one of the singers and also the sax player in a black metal band. Who knew? And she's watching the performance and this very striking woman with angel wings, drinking blood from a chalice. And she's just struck by the pageantry and the drama of it all. And so thinks, oh, what's this music all about? And disappears down a YouTube rabbit hole, discovering more and more about this music. By the time she's due to go back into the studio, she's completely sold on this idea of black metal and wants to incorporate that into the song. So reworks it from an electropop song into this aggressive, funereal black metal performance. So yeah, to try and turn what is essentially a very nice, bittersweet pop song into a black metal song, had a few obstacles to overcome. The first one was, I obviously always start by taking the original vocal and just singing it up to the tempo grid. So normally, most modern pop songs are recorded to a very strict tempo. A lot of them use programmed drums, or at least have a drummer who plays to a click track, so it's really easy to sync up. With this one, it's actually recorded with quite subtle, almost subliminal tempo changes in the chorus. I think it's when it gets to the line about you'd have to stop the world just to stop the feeling, and it slows down there. So I guess the music's reflecting the idea of the world stopping, which is great, very effective, except for me, it's a complete pain because it means that it doesn't sync up to the grid. So I had loads of faff just moving kind of individual peaks of the waveform back into time. So if any bits of the vocal are out of time, I'm sorry, I did my best. But I got it more or less in time. And then I popped some drums on. One thing you get quite a lot in black metal is time changes. So I wanted to start fairly slow and kind of imposing and then work up to something approaching a blast beat for the choruses. So did that, loads of double kicks and everything just to keep it fairly pummeling. Put some bass guitar on there, kept that quite simple, followed the root notes. Then I popped some guitars on, decided to have two pairs of guitars. The first two, which are just playing kind of power chord rhythm, and then the other two are playing tremolo picked single notes, which is quite common in black metal. If you cleaned up the guitar sound, it would sound like surf music. Like really kind of frantic tremolo picked guitars. So I had two of those, which are harmonizing with each other all the way through. Again, I don't know if anyone's interested, but if you are, the guitar I used for all of these, I think, was this one. So I've had this guitar for ages. I think it's a 1999-ish Epiphone G400 SG. Cool little guitar. I broke the pickup surround of the neck pickup years ago, and I never used the neck pickup anyway, so I just took it out and made this scratch plate, and then I put a Seymour Duncan JB in here. So this is kind of my go-to kind of hard rock heavy metal guitar because it just really handles kind of high gain sounds very well. So I've got my basic band on there, but it didn't sound dramatic enough for me at this stage. So I thought we needed to add some keyboards. Typically, black metal keyboards, you get a few different things like strings or choral sounds, sometimes an organ. I was looking for choral sounds. I didn't have any synths that did that, but last week I discovered the Mellotron sound in GarageBand, and lo and behold, Mellotron has a choir sound, and it's great. So I popped that on there, and it gives it this weird 70s film soundtrack quality, which I really like. I then, over the last chorus, added a tolling bell just to kind of sound like a church bell in the background there. And then I wanted to have a bit of a church organ sound there too. The pipe organ sounds on GarageBand are pretty disappointing, a bit too mellow for what I wanted. So I actually used another guitar. I've got this pedal. It's the Electro-Harmonix B9 pedal, which is an organ simulator, and it's got a cathedral setting on there. It doesn't sound super authentic if you listen to it up close, but blended in there, it just kind of adds that organ-like texture as well. So all those things combined just kind of give it that gloomy funereal tone as well, which I really wanted to kind of add to the drama of the whole thing. It's never going to sound exactly like black metal because, I mean, there are black metal bands who have clean vocals. Not too many, but bands like Ulver or Alcest, who I guess you'd probably call black gaze, like black metal tinge shoegaze, bands like that, but there's not too many. So it was never really going to have that the full black metal sound, but I think it certainly sounds informed by black metal. And it's got that gloomy feel. I basically turned everything minor key, so it sounds a lot darker and a lot more serious, I think. And then I wanted to create a video that kind of went along with this tone I'd created. Initially, I really wanted to use the VMAs footage, but there was no way I could get that past YouTube's copyright restrictions. I tried zooming in on it, cropping bits out, inverting it, turning it black and white, putting it in the frame. Nothing worked. The only bit I could use was the first 13 seconds, so they're still in there. So instead, I found a different performance to use. I kept it in the frame and with the scratchy black and white because I just really liked that. I thought that was a really cool effect. And then blended that in. I wanted to just find the most black metal looking band I could find to edit in there to look like they're being Chappell's backing band. So, as I say, ended up landing on Gorgoroth, who do look the part. Kind of regret using them because, as I say, at least one of them's a massive piece of shit. But what can you do? They're in there now. But I think it looks kind of cool. So yeah, I think it came out okay. I hope you enjoy it too. But yeah, let me know what you think. Also, if there's anything else you'd like me to do, any other artists you'd like me to look at, any songs you'd like me to try out, or any genres you'd like me to dip my toe into, do just drop a little note in the comments. Always appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, check out my other videos as well. I'll pop a link in the description below. But yeah, that's all from me for this week. I'll have another new music video on Monday. Going to continue an approximately spooky theme for October, so look out for that. And until then, see you next time.